George Bush's war in Iraq in 2003 was one of the biggest disasters of American foreign policy in decades. That war was started on false premises, the claim that intelligence showed there were weapons of mass destruction at all, which the administration went to great lengths to try and convince the American public. Then, of course, we launched this war, which turned out to be a regime change operation to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and we found out there were no weapons of mass destruction. All these people were killed. American troops were lost. It turned into, at least initially, an 8-year morass for the United States, cost trillions of dollars, thousands of Americans killed, tens of thousands wounded, trillions of dollars lost, hundreds of thousands of post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injuries for our troops, etc. Profound cost on the United States, profound cost on the people of Iraq as well. Are we getting ready to repeat that same problem here today? There are some rather disturbing similarities with what happened in 2003 and what's happening right now. The conditions are different, but the fundamentals and the things undergirding it and playing a central role is intelligence. What is intelligence saying, and what are our leaders saying about this intelligence? And then most importantly, what are the decision makers getting ready to do with that intelligence? That's the subject we want to talk to today. And then we want to specifically look at what's happening with first of all, the Israeli-Iranian war and the prospect that the United States could get involved in it. Let's take a look at this first of all. There was an interview yesterday with President Trump on the tarmac where he made a number of comments that are very poignant here. And one of the first ones we're going to show you here is where he was asked specifically about the lead-in for 2003. And is this the same thing?
20 years ago, you were skeptical of a Republican administration that attacked a Middle East country on the idea of questionable intelligence of weapons of mass destruction. How is this moment different with Iran?
Well, there were no weapons of mass destruction. I never thought there were. And that was somewhat pre-nuclear. You know, there was a nuclear age, but nothing like it is today. And it looked like I'm right about the material that they've gathered already. It's a tremendous amount of material. And I think within a matter of weeks, or certainly within a matter of months, they're going to be able to have a nuclear weapon. We can't let that happen. I was very much opposed to Iraq. I said it loud and clear, but I was a civilian, but I guess I got a lot of publicity. But I was very much opposed to the Iraq war. And I actually did say, don't go in, don't go in, don't go in. But I said, if you're going to go in, keep the oil. But they didn't do that.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
Okay, there's a number of things here that need to be discussed here. First of all, I'm not sure what he means by the 2003. Well, that was pre-nuclear. What is that? There's been nuclear weapons since 1945 when we used them. So kind of been around a little bit since then. 2003 was nothing pre. So it's not really clear what he's talking about with that. And unless perhaps he means that there weren't any nuclear weapons involved with Iraq, so that wasn't an issue. I don't know. It's not clear from context what he meant, but and he said a lot has changed in because he was talking about Iraq. So I'm not sure what his frame of reference is right there, but most assuredly 2003 was not pre-nuclear age. Then he focuses again. He's kind of scattershot. He's all over the place, but it kind of reveals how his mind is working and what he's thinking of. He says, yes, I was against the 2003 Iraq war. I said, don't go in, don't go in, don't go in. And I got a lot of publicity. The fact that he mentions that is an indicator of what his value. And I know that's not exactly shocking of Trump. I mean, he lives for publicity. But this shows you that even when we're talking about war and peace decision, that's something in the front of his mind, not the back of his mind. He was talking about the publicity he got for that. And so he loves to get that publicity again. So he takes a lot of these seemingly irrational moves and these, wild gyratic movements, etc. About, we're days away from striking, and then we're going to go to a negotiated settlement. And then we're back to now, then we're again possibly going to attack again. And then now here goes, we're going to try diplomacy one more time. And now then we're literally on the cusp of maybe entering the war, not even giving Israel a green light, which previously happened when this war kicked off here 7-8 days ago. But now then he's actively thinking about going in. And of course, then he makes this dramatic, declaration a couple of days ago that, well, now I'm going to give it 2 more weeks, implying that it could, because many thought it may have come this weekend, by even today. This is Saturday as we're making this presentation here. And now then we're in this new period where we don't know what's going to happen here. All these deadlines Trump has set and passed, and no action was taken on any of them. So we don't know if this was going to result in anything either. But let's circle back around to this issue of that his intelligence is wrong. That's one of the key things here. Now, there's been a lot of things here going on back and forth for a while now. So on the 25th of March, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, went before the Senate and said that the intelligence community continues to assess that Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program and that the Ayatollah has not given an order to start one. She continued to go on in that conversation and talk about that they have a lot of fissile material. They have a lot of reprocessed plutonium, et cetera, like up to 60%. And they could race to a bomb, in as little as a few weeks or a few months. But that the key point is they don't have a nuclear weapons program, and the Ayatollah has not given any instructions to such. If you're saying that your policy position is that they can't have a nuclear bomb, and if they don't negotiate with me, we're going to go to war, or we're going to compel them through force, you can't take that action if the intelligence says they don't have one. Because now then you're setting yourself up for a position to say, we're going to prevent you from going down this path that you're not going down. Because then it's self-evident. Then you have a different objective in mind. Your motivation is different. It's not about nuclear weapons. It would seem to be about something else. And of course, that something else looks remarkably similar to what it did in 2003, which is the removal of the regime. In 2003, Bush didn't care anything about weapons of mass destruction. That was all a ruse. We now know it for certain. It was a fact. So many of the, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, a number of senior Pentagon and administration officials, we're just using that as cover in order to justify going in on the ground and unseating Saddam Hussein, which they accomplished. They got their objective there, but man, did that cost us a lot and open up all kinds of chaos in the meantime. And it's funny that image that's on the screen right there. That's Bush, and then Colin Powell, who facilitated it by that famous time when I think that picture is actually from his UN Security Council speech, where he held up the vial and said, "This small vial of chemical weapons or biological weapons could kill thousands," and all this kind of stuff. At least so far, Tulsi has been on the other side of that, saying they don't have a process. But then you heard that Trump, when faced with that, and that's the second time he's done that in public, he just said, "Well, she's wrong. She's just flat wrong." That they when she says they don't have a weapons program. Now, Tulsi came out with an X post yesterday afternoon and again said that I'm completely in agreement with President Trump on his policy that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. But unless she has changed her assessment that I haven't seen, she still is not saying that they have a nuclear weapons program or that the Ayatollah has given the order to make one. Now, of course, as I have been saying and warning about for a long time, by attacking Iran, Israel may have provided the impetus for them to make that decision. So far, intelligence, according to the UN watchdog, I think his name was Gossi, he said, listen, they still don't have it. The Ayatollah still hasn't made it. This was day before yesterday, I believe, or maybe it was even yesterday. But his current assessment from having people on the ground right now, even in the midst of this conflict, they still have not done so. They still have not moved to a weapons program. So that continues to undermine the idea that we need to join this war. Well, who does have the motivation for this, and who is sounding this? And of course, when Trump says, well, she's wrong, why do you suppose he says that? Who's in his ear telling him the opposite? We know.
Less than 2 months ago, the new director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified on Capitol Hill, saying that everything had been suspended since 2003 and had not restarted, that the nuclear program had not been restarted by the Iranians. So did something change from end of March until this week? Was the U.S. intel wrong?
The intel we got and we shared with the United States was absolutely clear. Was absolutely clear that they were working in a secret plan to weaponize the uranium. They were marching very quickly. They would achieve a test device and possibly an initial device within months and certainly less than a year. That was the intel we shared with the United States. I think we have excellent intel in Iran. I think we've proven that. And that is something that we couldn't possibly accept. Whether it would be 6 months or 12 months or 13 months is immaterial. Once they go that route, it's too late.
So you see, just categorically, he asked him, was Tulsi Gabbard wrong? He said, yes. Our intelligence is certain they were taking action on a nuclear weapons program, and we couldn't wait for the breakout 10, all that kind of stuff. So Netanyahu said just a couple of days ago that he and Trump talk almost every day. And when he says, we gave that intelligence to the United States, whose ear do you think that went into? So you unequivocally have Netanyahu saying our intelligence contradicted what Tulsi Gabbard said. We gave that to the United States. And then the president says, she's wrong. My handpicked intelligence officer is wrong. So that is setting things up for a very, very dangerous situation to where, just like in 2003, where the United States entered a war against Iraq on false assumptions and false intelligence, the manipulation of intelligence to be something that they just wanted to put cover on what they were going to do on a military operation. And now then we're at the cusp of President Trump perhaps doing it again. Israel already has, and they are desperately trying to suck the United States into this as well. Now, this is coming in the midst of it. In fact, it was in the process of a negotiated attempt with Iran. There had been, I want to say, 5 rounds of negotiations. There had been one planned on last Saturday, or on the Saturday before all of this war with Israel started. So there was supposed to have been a meeting between the United States and Iran. So they were in the process of negotiating. And then all of a sudden, here comes Israel. And now then we're in the war back and forth, primarily an air and missile war between the two sides, which continues on every single day. Both sides are getting hit with pretty substantial missile strikes, and both sides are paying a significant price. The question is going to be, how much of a price can Iran pay? Now, a lot of people are wanting to say that Iran is on the ropes, that they have been hit, really bad. They've lost all these senior administration officials. They've lost military officials. Military sites have been hit. Their missile capacity continues to get eroded, et cetera, by hitting the launchers. And all that kind of stuff keeps being said about Iran. But then when we take a look at what Iranians are saying and how they're behaving to this, we see possibly a different picture emerging. I'm going to get to that in a second. But getting back to the negotiating point, one of the other questions that Trump was asked on the tarmac there was about this whole issue of reprocessing or no reprocessing capacity.
Would you support Iran being able to have civilian nuclear energy capabilities up to 3.76%?
They're sitting on the top of one of the largest piles of oil in the world. I just don't know why they need that for civilian work. It's one thing for certain countries to say, hey, I want to have a certain amount where I can go nuclear a little bit because we need it for electricity, we need it for air conditioners, etc. But when you're sitting on one of the largest oil piles anywhere in the world, it's a little bit hard to see why you need that.
So let me tell you why that comment is very instructive and troubling, because President Trump is setting himself up as the sole arbiter of war and peace decisions about who can and can't have nuclear power, what they do and don't do with it. He says, why do they need nuclear power? For civilian purposes. They got all this oil. Why are they even worried about it? They can use, they can use a little bit for air conditioned stuff, but they got so much oil, they shouldn't have to worry about it. So I'm just going to attack them, or I'm going to greenlight an attack. It's very clear that the United States greenlit the Netanyahu's operation. Anyone who claims to the contrary is just wanting to cover over what's clearly going on there. Because you saw Trump, even in his Truth Socials, was basically cheerleading when he heard that. He didn't at all say, wait a minute, I was in the middle of doing negotiations and you're undermining it. Nothing like that. He said, hey, I gave you guys an ultimatum, 60 days, and on day 61, here comes Iran, or here comes Israel. That makes it almost irrefutable that this was coordinated. Not even just that we gave a green line, but this was part of the plan and altogether. We're going to see how that comes into play here in just a few minutes. But if you're setting yourself up as saying, I decide whether it's okay for them to have a civilian nuclear program or not, It doesn't matter what they think. I don't think they need it, so they don't need it. And because I am the sole arbiter, I get to decide whether you're going to get attacked or not. And especially by the United States. And as we've been talking for the last number of days, there is substantial combat power, American combat power being sent to the region. 3 aircraft carrier strike groups, all kinds of aviation, refueling aircraft, and other transport ships, naval assets that are going into the red, destroyers, etc. All kinds of stuff has been going into the region. So there is a lot of power that's potential power that could be applied at any time. Some of our troops have been getting out of harm's way. Some of our aircraft have been relocated from some of the more accessible airfields. Some of our troops have been either consolidating or leaving the region in Syria, all that kind of stuff. So lots of pieces moving on there, implying that we may be getting closer to that. And if you have somebody who sets himself up, listen, you got to be honest. Even if you're a big Trump supporter, you have to be honest. He is acting more like a monarch than he is the president of the United States. I've mentioned many times, but it must be repeated here again. There is no legal justification, whether in the U.S. Constitution or the 1973 War Powers Act or international law, that gives any kind of justification for the president of the United States to independently and unilaterally send troops into harm's way and attack into another country. Point blank doesn't have that authority. But he is poised to take it. And of course, Congress is a feckless bunch, even though they have the constitutional balance of power on paper. Only a couple of members of the House and the Senate are even talking about this stuff. And so far, none of it has any traction because the institution itself has become feckless and an accomplice. We got to just call it what it is. But both parties, doesn't make any difference. And ironically, even the Democratic Party is basically taking a hands-off approach to this and not, rising up and saying, no, that's not what the Constitution says. Of course, because their guy does it when he's in power. So they don't want to set a bad precedent by, rising up and invoking the Constitution when it doesn't suit their party. That's part of the problem too. More on that in a future video. But now then, let's get back to the situation here. Are we getting closer to this war at all? One of the other questions that Trump was asked was, can we have a ceasefire? Can we just call this thing off and try to have some negotiations in a ceasefire situation? Very similar, by the way, to what is being requested on behalf of Ukraine in the Russia-Ukraine war. And in that war, obviously, the Russian side is in the dominant position. We saw just on yesterday's show, we showed you where Dmitry Peskov said, we're not going to do a ceasefire. Why would we do that? We're in the position of power. We would hand help to opportunities to our opponent and give them a chance to rebuild and recover. And we're not going to do that. We're simply not going to do that. And yet all of the European folks say, well, you're wrong, Russia. That's terrible. Everybody knows you first have a ceasefire, and then, and only then, can you talk about an end of war negotiations. That's just how it works. So the question is now put to Trump, does that same thing apply here in this particular case? Can Israel and Iran stop the fighting for a ceasefire to have a negotiation?
It's very hard to stop when you look at it. Israel's doing well in terms of war, and I think you would say that Iran is doing less well. It's a little bit hard to get somebody to stop.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard. So you see, Trump's impression is that Iran is doing poorly, Israel is doing good, so it's hard to get them to stop. So, is the standard we have to stop fighting in order to get a negotiated settlement, or is the standard whoever's in the upper hand side gets to call the shots? I mean, it really doesn't matter what anybody thinks or what you would like to be the truth. It only matters what is the truth. And it depends on, again, we always say this, matters what's true on the ground. So at the moment, it doesn't appear that, we know for sure Israel doesn't have any intention to stop. They continue to go forward with this, and they continue to press because evidence indicates that their objective is not the denuclearization or the prevention of Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, but regime change. So it's pretty clear by their target set and what they've been hitting that they're trying to foment a rebellion inside of Iran to get the Iranians to ironically and perversely do for Israel what it wants to be done on the ground. We'll see if that works. But then on the other side of that equation, the assumption is that the Iranians are on their back foot. Well, it does appear that in terms of the power distribution, that Israel does have the advantage here. And when you're talking cumulative, when you measure everything together, Israel, I think, is pretty clearly on the dominant side. But when you're talking about a conflict, and this war especially, because you're not talking about, unlike the Russia-Ukraine war, where you don't have two armies that are clashing on the ground, you just have the air component. For the Israel, it's primarily air power, air-launched missiles, and then also ground-based missiles, et cetera. And then on the Iranian side, it's almost exclusively aircraft and drones and ballistic missiles. So it's an air war is how this is so far. And the question is, who has the most capacity, who can continue producing missiles at a rate to sustain, and who can't? Now, I'll tell you a little bit about just kind of what the best we can get from open source information, from intelligence reports that have been issued, is that right now, Iran has some stockpile of missiles. There's wild diversions between what people are saying. Some say it's as few as 3,000. A couple have said it's as many as 28,000. Some say it's even more than that when you take all the different categories and put them together. No one really knows is the bottom line. But according to reports I read just this morning, most Western intelligence sources estimate that Iran can produce up to 300 missiles per month. And so that kind of matches with what we're seeing. Apparently, whatever the number of inventory that Iran has, they are probably holding back a solid percentage of that in order to actually, if the United States gets involved. So they don't want to deplete all of their capability. And then if the U.S. gets involved, suddenly they have no power to do anything. They want to reserve that. But the constant number of missiles that they can produce seems to be what they're on a pace to now. So they started off with I think like 100 missiles here and some other large number here, and then it started to diminish, and then a number of drones were sent in. Best estimates we can get is somewhere between 400 or 500 missiles have been launched by Iran so far, and about the same number of drones, long-range drones. So far, I haven't seen any reports of any drones that got through and caused any damage, but that's not necessarily the intent, because what we've also seen by Iranians. I actually saw a translation of an interview with one of the Iranian senior generals just right before we came on the show here, who said that what they're doing is they are sending, this is, by the way, corroborated by Western intelligence and what we've seen on our own evidence with Professor Ted Postel, who explained what we're seeing on the screen, is that they're using lots of what some might call decoy missiles, older missiles that many times the warhead starts to disintegrate and comes off the body on the way down, and you see these big trails leading up behind it. That's what that is, as Professor Postel had explained to us. But every one of those missiles requires 1 to 2 interceptor missiles to come down. When a radar's reading, it doesn't know if it's a new missile, old missile. It just knows it's an incoming missile. When you have these drones coming in, you can shoot them all down, but you can shoot down these $30,000, $40,000 drones with a $1 to $2 million interceptor missile. Those are much more difficult to replace. And we already know that Israel is already getting low on their interceptor missile. Well, if the Iranian side can continue some kind of negotiation or a density of attacks, it's going to continue to deplete Israel's performance. We also see very clearly that when it comes to some of the better ballistic missiles, that it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the Iron Dome, the David Sling, the Arrow system, the THAAD, the Patriot system, and apparently a couple of other systems as well. Israel has 7 different kinds of systems that are integrated into the air defense. Their missiles are still getting through. So Iran appears to be on a steady state to where they can launch 20, 30 missiles per day and stay within their production capability, if that's what it is. The Iranians also claimed that they saw all this coming, that they were taken by surprise when it happened, but they were not taken by surprise that it happened. And so they said that they had beforehand, before the attack happened, they said they had moved their nuclear material into a safe location somewhere to where it can't be hit. Obviously, they're not going to tell anybody where that is, but someplace that it's safe, whether that means it was sent someplace that no one knows about, or whether it was sent into Fordo or some other of these deeply buried bunkers where they think that it's going to be protected against even the best of our bunker buster materials. It's unknown, but they said they knew ahead of time. That's more important than you may think. Hang on just a second. They also said that they started ramping up their production of missiles, so it may be more than 300 per month. But the bottom line is it appears that Iran can maintain a strike capacity where they can continue to maintain fire rockets every day and missiles that and some number are going to get through. And we are seeing videos literally every day of something in Israel on fire because this continues on. So the issue here and why that's important is if Iran has the fissile material protected somewhere, and if they have the ability to reprocess steel somewhere, whether that's at Fordo or Bushehr or Natanz buried deep underground somewhere else, that then you're not going to destroy Iran's capacity to make a nuclear weapon at some point. You may set it back, you may make it difficult, but you can't destroy it. The guy also on the Iranian TV said, listen, they've assassinated a number of our leaders and a number of our scientists, but we have hundreds of them. And we have the resident power or the knowledge banks. So whenever a time of our choosing, we'll simply act on it if we choose to go into the nuclear weapon program. So if they think they're going to destroy our capacity, the Israeli side is mistaken. And I think that that's probably more than just braggadocio. I believe that, it makes sense that with all the signals Israel was sending that they wanted a war. So it would have been actually ridiculous for Iran not to have taken these positions and to these precautions. So I think it's probably reasonable that that's maybe accurate to some degree or another. But it's very clear that Israel has a much, much higher possibility and threshold to succeed here. They have said, at least publicly, that it's to destroy Iran's capacity to make a bomb. That's what Netanyahu said. Well, they're not going to succeed with that. There's virtually no chance they're going to succeed with that. Now, if their actual objective was the overthrowing the regime, there is some possibility for that, but all the cards have to fall right. And it's a gamble. It's not a risk. It's a gamble because basically they're trying to reprise the Libyan model to where they weaken the regime power structures enough for their senior leaders, their military capacity, so that people will rise up from inside. The people who are against the regime will rise up using the Israeli military as basically their proxy force and then overthrow the regime. That's not entirely implausible. It actually could happen. I think it's very unlikely, and so unlikely that it's a gamble. It's not a risk, because if you don't succeed there and you don't succeed at getting the nuclear issue off the table, then now what are you going to do, Israel? Are you just going to go into this indefinite, just back and forth missile fire every day, having your buildings and facilities blown up? And by the way, we're talking about major research facilities, energy infrastructure, fuel reprocessing position, things that Israel needs to conduct even its other wars, the other fronts of its war against Hezbollah potentially, Hamas for sure, in the Gaza Strip, the Houthis in Yemen, etc. So there's a lot of things that they've got going on, and that's going to complicate their issues there too. And you just can't go on with all these wars indefinitely. And yet that is the path that we're on right now. So getting back to where we're going next, I'm going to shift gears in just a second here from what Trump is saying. He's talking about negotiations to what the Iranian side is. And the comments that you're going to see from the Iranian foreign minister in a minute are probably informed by these factors that I just told you about here of how Iran sees its position. First of all, here's one more comment about Trump on negotiations.
The Iranian foreign minister this afternoon said if the U.S. is serious about negotiations, that you would call up Israel and request that they stop their airstrikes. Will you make that request?
Well, I think it's very hard to make that request right now. If somebody's winning, it's a little bit harder to do than if somebody's losing. But we're ready, willing, and able, and we've been speaking to Iran, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
If Americans are serious to go back to diplomacy, what it needs is only a telephone call from Washington to Tel Aviv to stop everything. This is how we understand. So they can stop this process very quickly. And then we will consider diplomacy once again. I cannot say 100% that we go back to negotiations because it's meaningless. They've attacked us. They have killed our people. And then when they stop, we consider as if nothing has happened.
And, of course, from the Iranian perspective, you have to add on that Donald Trump himself got out of the last agreement they had with the JCPOA, the nuclear deal that organized by the Obama administration in 2015. So the trust is already threadbare, and then now they've been attacked, and their Ayatollah and several of their other leaders have categorically said, we are not going to negotiate from a position of being attacked. You got to stop before we'll even talk about it. They have never stopped being willing to have a negotiated settlement. All during the Biden administration, they were willing. There was talk, but nothing ever came of it. The Biden administration placed too little emphasis on it, put forth very little resources because they were focused on having a war against Russia using the proxy of Ukraine. So they just didn't put much interest in it. And so it just wobbled around, but there were still discussions. Now, in the Trump administration, I think there were 5 rounds of negotiations before this. And as the foreign minister continued on, he said, look, you talk about the loss of trust. We were already in negotiations. We were doing diplomacy when all this happened.
We were in the middle of diplomacy when Israel attacked us. And to be honest with you, we have come to the conclusion that negotiations by the US was in fact a cover for what Israelis did. So they had perhaps this plan in their mind, and they just needed negotiations perhaps to cover it up. We don't know how we can trust them anymore. What they did was in fact a betrayal to diplomacy.
And listen, that's why I mentioned earlier in this show, when Trump had said we were having diplomacy, when he had a meeting scheduled between Witkoff and the Iranian side on a Saturday, but then the attack comes earlier than that, it gives the impression that either we were caught unaware and that the Iranians or the Israelis subverted what we were doing and undermined our diplomacy, or, and this is the problem here, and may even been what he had in mind when Trump posted that, I gave him 60 days, and then on day 61, here comes Israelis missiles. So if you're having negotiations, and if you have scheduled a negotiating meeting here, but then you celebrate the next day on social media that the 61st day came here, it implies you knew it was coming, that it had been coordinated with Israel, and that this was a ruse. There's room to have that interpretation, especially if you're on the receiving end of it. I mean, it's not unprecedented. That's what the Japanese did to us at Pearl Harbor. You may recall that the attack that they had on December 7th, 1941, we were in the process of having negotiations. There were Japanese negotiators in Washington that were actively working with the United States, et cetera, trying to come up with some negotiated settlement where they had certain knowledge for sure that an attack was coming. And all of this was just to keep the United States at bay and not paying attention to what's going on in the Pacific, et cetera. Did something like that happen again? Were we the ones that did what the Japanese did in 1941? I don't know, but evidence suggests that's maybe exactly what happened. Time will tell on that, but the information that we have at Trump's own mouth or his keyboard certainly implies that that's a very significant possibility. So the question is going to be, what is Iran going to do about that? And all of that's just on the diplomatic track, but we're still waiting to find, is Trump going to drop the hammer down? Is he going to enter the war, not just help Israel, not just give them bombs and missiles, not even just be a defensive bulwark against any incoming Iranian ordinance, but is he going to enter the fight? And everybody's looking at the Fordo nuclear site because that's the one where it's the deepest underground, and that Israeli capability and their bunker busters won't even come close to that. All they have the capacity to do non-nuclear is to hit the tunnel entrances and knock out the surface facilities, which are primarily administrative in nature. All the things that matter are buried deep underground. And by the way, I'll just kind of point out there, I say they're non-nuclear forces because there is some concern among many that if the United States doesn't get involved, and if we don't use our GBU-57 deep penetrator bomb, that maybe Israel could potentially consider using one of their tactical nuclear weapons. And I pray to God that never happens. And I certainly hope that President Trump would just put a veto on that and say, you do that and you are on your own. We are never going to do anything more, because that letting that nuclear genie out of the bottle will have implications that nobody can predict, but that are almost all bad. Much worse for us, and the international security environment will change in ways that could presage the entry of a new nuclear war age. I can't predict that, so I don't want to even speculate, although it would be really bad if we go down that path. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But let's first of all hope that we don't even get into this first one here, because and let's get back to what Foreign Minister Iraqi had to say on that very topic.
Attacking a nuclear facility is an unforgivable violation of international law. How can a regime can do that and nobody condemns in the West? How they can kill people, how they can commit genocide in Gaza. There is no red line that Israeli regime has not crossed.
And so you see there, I mean, he's like, what? Where is there even the possibility of negotiations if you bomb our nuclear facilities? If you come and do that and then keep crossing all these lines. And of course, he refers back to the Israeli-Hamas war in the Gaza Strip, to where the Palestinian people keep paying this horrendous price, where they watch as Israeli forces attack the Palestinian people in areas where they're coming to try to get food. I mean, it's this horrific situation, to where the people are terrified of going to these food distribution points because it's become now routine. Happens nearly every day that Palestinian people are killed around the food distribution sites. But it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you don't go there and take the risk, then you could starve to death. Then if you go, you take the risk of being blown up. So it's a horrible situation, but that keeps happening every day and no one's doing anything about it. That's why he's saying he's beside himself, that how come no one cares about any of this? And listen, I just want to reinforce this point here. I'm not defending the Iranian regime at all. They have done a number of things over many decades that have been illegal, and they themselves have broken international law. They've done lots of, they've killed plenty of people too. There's lots of plausible reports that they helped kill Americans and facilitated through these penetrators during the Iraq war that we fought in 2003 to 5, that time frame during the insurgency. So lots of blood on their hands. No defense of that. But every situation has to be taken at its own merit. And what they're saying here, unfortunately, is accurate, that these terrible things are going on here and literally no one's doing anything about it. So next question is, if Trump does take this, is Iran going to basically just, suck it down and just say, well, it sucks to be me, or are they going to do something about it?
If the U.S. join Israel in these attacks, we will do the same. We actually retaliate as a form of self-defense. I think if Americans are serious to go back to diplomacy, what it needs is only a telephone call from Washington to Tel Aviv to stop everything. This is how we understand. So they can stop this process very quickly. And then we will consider diplomacy once again. I cannot say 100% that we go back to negotiations, because it's meaningless. They've attacked us. They have killed our people. And then when they stop, we consider as if nothing has happened.
And, we've shown you some of the maps of the region. Our troops are all over the place in Bahrain, our Navy, in Qatar, our Air Force, our Army is scattered throughout Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. All those places there. We've composed some of them and gotten some people out, but it's only consolidated and reduced the number of targets. But you can't get everybody out in a short notice like that. So if we go in and attack anything, whether Fordo or elsewhere, I think the chances are very high, to the point of being probable, that our naval assets, our air assets, and our ground assets will all be taken under fire from Iran. I'm pretty confident that they have specifically held back a number of ballistic missiles, some of their best stuff, for this probability. If they prepared ahead of time for an Israeli attack, they certainly have prepared ahead of time for an American counterstrike and what they're going to do in response to it. So I think that we have to take them at their word based on what they have done over the 2024 in responding to Israel, what they have done now with very effective strikes in retaliation. They have hit a lot of senior issues in our facilities, rather, in Israel, and there's no reason to think that they suddenly wouldn't do it because it had an American tag on it if we get into the war. So I think we can count on the war expanding to include us, which of course could just draw us deeper and further into a war, because then there's no evident exit. Can you imagine President Trump going, okay, we went in this, we bombed Fordo, you blew up our air base at Oman, you sank one of our ships in Bahrain, and okay, all right, well, it was bad, we shouldn't have done it, but whatever. I mean, we hit you, you hit us, all right, we'll just call it a day and move on. That's not even in his vocabulary. That's not in his mindset anywhere. He would then, of course, double down because he has to be seen as a strong guy. He wants to be seen as the one who's calling the shots, and he would never just back down. So then he would escalate, which would then get more Americans killed, would expand the war, get more Iranians killed, etc. And God only knows where it would go from there. That's what we're facing right now. And by the way, this gets again back to this issue. What's the objective? Is the objective really to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon? Or is it, like in 2003, has a different motivation involved? Well, I'm gonna show you just one representative sampling. There's plenty of them. And that's from Lindsey Graham, who's talking about what he wants Trump to do right now, despite all the warnings I just showed you, and where he wants him to go.
I would urge President Trump to go all in to make sure that when this operation is over, there's nothing left standing in Iran regarding their nuclear program. If that means providing bombs, provide bombs. If that means
busting bombs,
whatever bombs. If it means flying with Israel, fly with Israel. The worst possible outcome for the world is to take the Iranian nuclear program on and leave it stand. The days of expecting Israel to sit on the sidelines and not go to the heart of the beast are over. Take this regime down, make the world a better place.
So, yeah, there you have it. Take the regime down, make the world a better place. Bomb everything in Iran. Don't leave anything standing. I mean, first of all, it's just embarrassing that he doesn't understand the military difficulty of getting that done. Even you see that Israel is pummeling with aircraft, with air supremacy. Apparently their aircraft can fly with impunity. And you see that they're not bringing Iran to its knees. So I don't know, what do you think a few more air sorties is going to do to change that calculation? We already don't have enough air defense missiles to give any more to Ukraine. We're already scraping the bottom of the barrel to give to Israel, and now then you're going to have to add them to ours, and then you have the offensive capacity here, you oblivious to or unconcerned about the expected response of Iran, and that it would kill more Americans. Seems to be totally unconcerned about that. It's not going to have any success. And then he's again wanting regime change. Let's just get these guys out of there. I showed you Newt Gingrich a couple of days ago. He was just talking in these really grandiose business that Trump and Netanyahu are going to be the Reagan and Thatcher. They're going to reshape the entire Middle East, which is very similar language to what Bush said in 2003. We're going to reshape the Middle East. It's going to be a friendly democracy is going to come everywhere. Well, obviously that didn't happen. It was complete and utter disaster. Tens of thousands of people were killed and wounded by Americans. Hundreds of thousands were killed and wounded in Iraq. And it just made the place worse. And nothing is better than it was because of it. In fact, strategically, it's actually worse for us because Iraq was a bulwark against Iran. Now then, that's taken off the table. There's still, though, balance because of Saudi Arabia and several of the other Gulf Arab Emirates. They're also balanced out. So we don't even need to be involved in any of this. Our security is not at risk. So we don't need to go and bomb anyone out of submission. And yet, one more piece of information I want to show you, because this is going around a lot, that a former crown prince of Iran is running around saying, yeah, make me the next king. I mean, the next democratically elected leader.
The control apparatus of the regime is almost collapsing. Reports that are coming to us from personnel within the military or intelligence that says so, that it's really falling apart. And hopefully at some point, the world will say, now it's time for us to step in and allow for this process to take its natural course, help the Iranian people overcome this regime.
We know that President Trump is currently considering the use of a bunker buster bomb on the Fordo facility in Iran, which is believed to have a nuclear facility buried deep into the ground. What would you say to President Trump as he considers that option?
I hope it doesn't get to this point. I think there's enough damage done to the regime without having to take it to the next level. The job at hand is A, eliminate this regime and replace it with a secular democratic alternative.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to go to war. Let's just replace the Mullah regime with a secular regime like me. Send me over there. uh, Oblivious to the fact that you're talking about another revolution or a complete defeated war. And you're not going to get that unless you invade with an army. And there is no army to invade, not Israeli, not American, not European. Nobody is even contemplating that. Ergo, it's fantasy. It's wishful thinking. Again, we get back to what I mentioned at the first of this. You're rolling the dice with this gamble that you can do the Libya model. That's what they're trying to do here. Make sure you see that. They're trying the Libya model. Well, they want to weaken Iran enough, and their IRGC and their security services, they want to weaken them enough that then they hope that the Iranian people will rise up and then overthrow them, like what happened in Libya. And we've seen some people, we've shown you a couple of commentary from some regional experts who say this is not the likely here. People who don't like Iran are saying this, by the way, not apologists for Iran. They're saying that, well, the chances of that are pretty remote because this is not Jack Keane. That's who it was. We showed him yesterday and he's all on board with getting rid of Iranian nuclear capabilities and the mullahs. But even he said, well, this is not the same as Libya. The people in Iran are different. The country's different. It's this huge, massive country. Too many people take too little of an example or understanding of that. Gary, if you could throw that big map back up there again, the one you had that showed all the ranges of the missile. Let's just make sure we're clear on the size of all this. So there's Iran in the middle. There's Saudi Arabia, just to the left of it. You can see this massive size of Saudi Arabia, which includes Yemen and down in the bottom, et cetera. And then just to the left of that is a relatively small, tiny Iraq. And you see that Iran is 3 times bigger than that. And, little tiny Israel down there. I want to say, I think somebody said the number is like 1/16 the size or something, maybe not even that big. You're not going to just pummel this entire country by firing a few missiles at it. You're not going to overthrow, or you're not likely to overthrow. Let me be clear, because I don't have all the knowledge about what's happening inside. I have talked to some expert recently who have direct contact with people inside of Iran that work with the opposition figures because they do want to see the Mullah regime gone. But even they say, listen, the regime has been weakened, but internationally, especially in its attack capabilities with Israel. It has been weakened, but its domestic services and its domestic hold on power have not even been touched. And so there's no effort right now. And there's not even the capacity for these people to rise up and have the wherewithal to be able to storm the place, et cetera. So there's not that existence. You may recall that there had been a lot of covert help in the Libya situation to foment opposition figures and to fund them and arm them and all this kind of stuff. And that's what happened in Syria as well. And I have no knowledge of any such process going on in Iran. I know that they're always looking for that kind of thing, but so far it hasn't happened. And so the pieces don't appear to be in place that makes that gamble worth it. So one has to hope that this 2-week extension that Trump gave from what was allegedly going to be some bombing this weekend, maybe even today, that will get pushed back so that it doesn't happen at all. If President Trump is wise, he's going to listen to his intelligence community. It's not just an issue of Tulsi Gabbard herself. It's the intelligence community. They have assessed and they continue to assess. And the UN IAEA continues to emphasize, even though that Iran has cheated on some things, even though they do have this large stockpile of 60% uranium, they still have not made a decision to go to a bomb. The Ayatollah still has not given that word. So it's unanimity nearly across the board, other than in Israel, of course, who has the most motivation for that not to be true, because they want to suck the United States into it. The United States should not in any way, shape, or form be loaned out to Israel to be an extension of the Israeli armed forces. U.S. armed forces are for our national defense. It is not for Israeli offensive operations to just be handed out like Lindsey Graham somehow wants to happen, like Jack Keane somehow wants to happen. I just cannot understand why so many Americans are so eager to hand over our forces, to put our men and women in uniform at risk, to sacrifice our men and women in their lives in fighting a war or being on the receiving end of an Iranian missile, because we want to go help the regime in Israel, because we want to say the Netanyahu government, we prioritize you and what you want above what Americans want. We prioritize you obtaining your military objectives above the very lives of American servicemen and women. I stand categorically against that. I prioritize American values, American interests, and the lives of our soldiers in a uniform above any other country. If somebody else in Israel wants to go on an offense, if they want to roll the dice on whether their country is going to be able to leave this war in a better position they started, that's up to them. I can have my opinions, but whatever, that's their country. They're sovereign. They can make their decision. Their people elect whoever they want, and then they get whatever they get. Do not add our country into the mistakes that are being made here. Do not hand over control of our country to the uses of a different government for their purposes when we're not at risk. We're not threatened. No one has attacked us. No one's going to attack us because of the power that we have, unless we launch an attack and then force them to just respond. Otherwise, they're not going to. In fact, I'm not aware of any time other than, some of these proxy kind of situations in relatively small numbers where Iran has attacked the United States. Everything else has always been us attacking them, like when we assassinated Soleimani, when now Israel has attacked Iran, when Israel destroyed the Iranian embassy, when Israel assassinated somebody in the Iranian capital during a presidential inauguration, etc. All these highly inflammatory emotional issues designed to try and spawn some kind of response. And then Israel always claims, and we showed you this with their ambassador, Danny Danon, a couple of days ago. He talks about all these things Iran is doing without mentioning any of the antecedents of that, what caused it, as though Iran is just taking all this action and, my gosh, we have to do something about it. And every single one of them was precipitated first by an Israeli attack into Iran. And then when the response comes and they say, see, I told you so. All right, you want to do that? That's your deal. I think it's a bad idea, but do not drag my country into war. Do not cause and force American people to die, people who have signed up and been willing to defend our country and defend our people. And now then their lives are going to be sacrificed because we're thrusting them into a war that they have no interest in and no need to fight. That's what needs to happen here. And I really hope President Trump gets that. I hope this 2-week buys him the opportunity for enough people inside of his inner circle to get through and say, Mr. President, this is not our deal. This is not our fight. We can't win here. We gain nothing from this. There is nothing America would gain from using our attempt to take out the Fordo side or anything else in Iran. All of it is risk. All of it would be lost on the other side. I pray and I hope that's the way it turns out. Anyway, also, I want to ask you, again, I got so focused on this, Gary asked me to say it earlier. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't. Really means a lot to us. It helps us out. Sorry about that, Gary. Missed that again. But just know that, by the way, just kind of let you know, also, I am going to be traveling to London for the next week or so. I'm going to do a few shows from there. Gary's going to do some shows on his own. We may have a guest host or two. Harry Kazianis is also going to be doing some host show. We're going to make sure you're going to keep getting information here. So as things happen, we'll be on it. If there's breaking news, even though I'm in London, I will break in and cover those things. So we're going to keep being there. Be sure and watch what we're going on, though, because anything that happens, folks, when you get breaking news, you can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive to be right there for you. So appreciate that. And let's keep on watching, and we'll see you next time on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.